Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Rich Lyons, Dean here at Berkeley Haas. I want to welcome you to this, our Dean's Speakers Series. I'm glad you could join us today. This is our highest level speaker series, as you know. This is in fact the final week of the Dean's Speaker Series for this fall semester. I will introduce our guest today in just a moment. Thursday is the last of the talks for the fall. That is Biz Stone. He's one of our Haas Executive Fellows and co-founder of Twitter. Biz will be speaking on Thursday. He'll have lots to share. There will be more information on our website about registration and attendance at that one. So today, it is a great honor for me to welcome my boss's boss, I think is the way to say this, Janet Napolitano, to our Haas School of Business here at UC Berkeley. She is the leader of all of us. She is the president of our University of California system, our wonderful 10-campus system. She assumed her responsibility in that leadership role just over a year ago. It was September of 2013. Let me give you just a few numbers to give you some sense for the span and scope of this remarkable institution. Just the UC campuses, nearly 250,000 students, some 240,000 students, roughly 200,000 staff and faculty, and when you put it all together, we have 1.7 million living alumni of the UC system, and the annual operating budget that she oversees is some $25 billion. President Napolitano came to UC following, as you know, a distinguished career in public service, record of leading large, complex organizations at the state level, at the federal level. Her public office roles include Secretary of Homeland Security, Governor of the state of Arizona, Attorney General of Arizona, U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona, and many others. She was the first woman chair of the National Governors Association, was named one of the nation's top 5 governors by Time magazine. Before she entered the public sector, she practiced at the law firm of Lewis and Roca, that was in Phoenix, where she was a partner. President Napolitano earned her Bachelor of Science degree from Santa Clara University, where she was Phi Beta Kappa, a Truman Scholar, and also the university's first female valedictorian. She holds a law degree from the University of Virginia School of Law. She was awarded the prestigious Thomas Jefferson Foundation Medal at the University of Virginia. That is that university's highest external honor. There's so much more I could say, many, many accomplishments. Let me jump right in. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Janet Napolitano.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.
So as there are many questions I have, I'll get to ask only a subset of them, and then we will turn it back to the audience as usual so that you can get your questions in as well. Why don't we start with this role, this remarkably encompassing role? What are the things that excite you about the role, and maybe one or two things that keep you up at night?
Well, you know, you've described kind of the universe of the University of California, but what excites me is when you actually get into not only the breadth of the university, but the depth of the university in so many different areas. And not only in terms of scholarship and research, but in terms of the social mobility that it offers and provides to California. It's not just a 250,000 students, but of the undergrads, to about 190,000 of those students. 42% will be from first-generation families. 25% come from homes where English was not the primary language. Another 40-some-odd% come from very low-income families, as measured by Pell Grant eligibility. I mean, there's no other public university in the country that matches the degree, those numbers, the degree of kind of social mobility and the access to the kind of excellence of a university like UC. Yeah. So California somehow got the secret sauce and got it right.
Yeah. And that's because there was a new ranking that came out, I think it was new, of global universities. I think in the world, I think UCLA came in this U.S. News ranking from last week at number 8. I think Berkeley was number 3 in the world. Where did that come from? Just to dig in on that last comment you made. how do we have so many remarkable universities in one system?
Well, first of all, California did it as a system. They did it pursuant to a master plan that was conceived of 50 some odd years ago, whereby the thought was, let's expect higher education for Californians, but let's think of three portals of entry. Community colleges, then called junior colleges, for those who don't want a 4-year degree, or for those that need 2 more years to be ready for a 4-year school. CSU, the California State University system, which is the primary bachelor degree granting institution in the states, where a lot of the teachers come from, peace officers, civil servants, and the like. And then the UC being the research cohort of the entire master plan system. So they thought of it as a system, and they put tremendous public resources into that system. So the expectation not only was you would go to higher education, but it would be free. Now that expectation no longer holds, but that system of organization was unmatched across the country, Rich. No other state kind of really thought it through about what it takes.
Yeah. And so many, from the 60s, 50 plus years later, right? Still enduring strength. I mean, obviously pressures in the system. When people talk about pressures on the public funding,
Right.
The unreliable partner way of thinking about things from your predecessor, Mark Udoff. As we think about the publicness, I think for many of us in the UC system, right, it means something to be at a public institution, right?
Yes.
And so that public mission nature, could you say a few things more about publicness in an environment where such a small fraction of our resources are coming from the state?
Well, I think the public nature reflects itself 2 ways. One is the doors of the university are open to anyone, regardless of socioeconomic background, race, ethnicity, religion, creed, sexual preference, you name it. The doors are open. Actually, one of the real strengths of the university is the financial aid, the return, what they call the return to aid dimension here, where 30% of every tuition dollar gets actually put right back into student aid for students, which has allowed us to get the kind of stats that I was giving you a little bit earlier. So that's part of the public notion of it. But the second, I think, is the public aspect or the public benefit of so much of the work that we do, not only in terms of who we produce, but the impact of a lot of the research that goes on in the university and how that spins out economically throughout the state of California. And that has helped make California what it is today, which I think is probably the most sustained economic success in the country, albeit taken a few hits over the last few years.
Yeah, on that theme, because I think we've all seen how much you've already begun advancing the way we think about what we might be able to achieve as a system, right? Sort of how do we get technology to the benefit of society even more effectively and things along those lines. Could you talk a little bit about your conception there about making this UC system even more valuable in terms of how what we produce benefits society?
Well, I'll give you an example in the medical research arena, and I'll give you an anecdote. So I was on a plane flying back to Oakland from D.C., and I'm seated next to a fella, and he's on his laptop. It turns out he's a faculty member at UCSF, and I asked him what he was working on, and he was just coming back from the NIH. And they're doing human clinical trials on a new treatment for people who have Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And he showed me on his laptop what they have devised, which was this device through which they insert a genetically modified set of cells that are inserted right into the part of the brain that's damaged by Parkinson's. And then those cells begin to replicate into healthy brain cells. And then he showed me a before of a patient, one of their first subjects of the clinical trial. 45-year-old man, he's wobbling, his head's moving, he can't eat by himself because his hands don't work, they don't operate. And then he showed me the after, and you think the guy had never been sick. Now that's a pretty incredible demonstration.
Yeah.
Now, we can either keep that demonstration within the halls of science, or we can begin thinking about how we use the market to start and to accelerate the movement of that science to the world at large, to the physicians and patients and their families who could really benefit from that. So he and I were talking about the same issue, about how you use the market to magnify and as an accelerator to bring research, particularly in the sciences, out to the public and to the world.
This is a self-serving question, but business schools, of which we are one, may be able to help you do that.
School. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me just offer my services. I'll turn, if I may, to leadership, because there people will also be interested. You've had so many different roles in different sectors, right? And as you think about your style of leadership, how it's evolved, were there kind of some fundamental transition points where you say, "Wow, that was fundamental right there"?
Obviously, lots of lessons learned and lots of mistakes made along the way. And it is a constant learning process. I think one of the things that I began to distinguish was between management and leadership. There's good managers, and there are things you're learning about, how to be effective managers, how to watch your bottom line, how to leverage your resources, how to handle your HR, all those kinds of things, how to handle your marketing, etc. But leadership, is, I think, a larger, more inchoate concept, and it's about creating a larger vision and persuading people that that's a vision that they can buy into and want to be a part of. Even if they have, everyone from somebody who works in the cafeteria to somebody who's the chief of staff, and everybody in between. And the larger and the more complex the organization, the tougher that is, the tougher the job that is. But if I spend too much of my day in meetings about just only management, I think to myself, well, we're getting the balance wrong a little bit here. And so that was one thought. And the other is how to manage your own schedule, because the pressures on your time are incessant, and they only expand. And it's not till you take control over your schedule that you actually leave yourself time to think, reflect on what you're doing, adjust perhaps how you're articulating things, et cetera, et cetera. And so I used to think I was like a robot and I could just do 24/7 and all like this, and I was scheduled like that. I think it was probably after my first year as a governor that I finally figured out, you know what, I am the governor. I can control my schedule.
And I am the dean, and I can control my schedule. So I think,
you watch out. You guys will get overscheduled sometime.
I'm out of here.
What I'm talking about. Okay.
So do you block time then? I mean, do you sort of say, this whole day I'm gonna reflect, or this half a day, or once a month, or is it not quite that structured?
Oh, no, not first. You never get a day. I mean, what's a day? No, you don't get a day.
No.
An hour.
An hour.
An hour is good. I'll take an hour. But also making sure that you protect personal time, right? So that you have some balance in your life, because your thinking is better when you have that balance.
That's really true. So what do you do when in your off time to
What do I do for balance?
re-anchor yourself?
I read.
Yeah.
And I've always had the practice. I don't know what you do, Rich, but I read at least an hour at night before I go to sleep. And I read broadly fiction, nonfiction, anything but work.
Yeah.
Work reading doesn't count in that concept.
Yeah.
Music, you
Yeah.
know, I like to hear live music. Travel, you know, trying to protect a little time for travel. Yeah. So a mix of things.
It's working. You seem like you're enjoying yourself.
Oh my heavens, this is the greatest job. I have so many of my colleagues, you know, you go to DC and they're just, I mean, they're tired.
They're
it
tired.
is. And you know, working in Washington is a very tough environment. And I did 5 years. There are people working there now who are, you know, going on 6, 7, coming, you know, right off of campaigns and so forth. And it's just exhausting work. And they all say to me, "How do you get a job like the one you got?"
Yeah.
And plus, you know, living in California, I mean, what's not to like?
It's a nice mix.
Yeah,
it's a great mix. Yeah, I liked very much your when you were talking about leadership versus management. You talked about kind of vision and the sort of the shared nature of vision and how that can pull people together. Another area, sort of, when we think about what we in business school would call culture, a set of institutional norms and values. So is the role for a leader, whether you think about it more politically or more in your current role, do you think about the setting of values? Is that part of the setting and strengthening of culture within institutions?
I think so. And I mean, particularly when you're talking about an institution like the University of California, where you've got the education and all the values associated with educating the next generation. You've got research and the value of not only conducting it, but making sure that it is excellent. Yeah. I mean, there is a quality of excellence there that is a value. Yeah. You know, we're not here to be mediocre. Yeah. We're here to be excellent.
Good for you.
And then a value I have as the president is a value in trying to help people see the larger whole, because it's 10 different campuses plus, you know, 3 national labs plus, but 10 different campuses. Everybody's in their own school, in their own department. You can get siloed very, very quickly. And I think people are more energized if they see where their position is in relation to this whole institution. And really believe in it as the greatest public university in the world.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's
you got to believe.
You got
you got to believe.
And I think perfectly consistent with that. One piece of wonderful advice I got from one of our Haas board members. Her name is Margot Alexander, and I remember she said, "Don't forget, you are the chief purpose officer." Mm-hmm. You need to connect people to the purpose. We are all in education. It might be an easier domain than some others to find purpose, but you know, a lot of the people here don't get to connect with the science and with the students in quite the way you and I do, right? And reminding them is just fundamental.
That's right. We have the advantage of seeing a lot of our aperture is broader.
Right. Well put. We're reminded of it often. Could you say a few things about? So today is election day. It happens to be election day, and
gosh, in California, you hardly know.
That's right. Yeah. But if so one of the elements of election, you know, when we think about public service, and you've served the public in so many different ways, and I think that among a young generation, I guess I'm asking whether you agree or disagree, they can hear a word like public service and say, that's what I'm about. Mm-hmm. And they can also, perhaps to our detriment, hear a term like politics and think that's not what I'm about.
Right.
That dichotomy, I think, was much less evident 20 years ago. Does that dichotomy in people's thinking worry you? Is it something we should be thinking about?
It worries me a lot because, you know, politics is where public policy is set. And I hear a lot of students say they want to do, they'll teach for America or go to a nonprofit or this, all noble. But, the work of running for an elective office, for whatever reason, has got a bad rep to it. And I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. I think it's a combination of the ultra-partisanship that our districting system, among other things, facilitates. I think the media, the 24/7 media market, that's you cannot overstate the difference I think that is made. So politics gets ranked, right down there, when in fact some of the best people I have worked with over my career have been my fellow AGs and governors and cabinet members. I mean, these were really smart, dedicated people, high values, but those are not the ones that are going to get a lot of coverage. So we have to get people excited about government and government service again. It used to be viewed as a noble calling. I think it still is a noble calling.
Oh, actually, it kind of has to be at some level. It better be.
Yeah.
Right?
Because if we don't do it, who will?
Getting made, whether we like it or not.
Indeed.
Yeah. How about? We'll open it up to questions in just a moment. But here's something that I mentioned to you briefly on the walk over here. So. The administration about 3-4 months ago brought together the deans of the top business schools in this country to think about how we, not just as business schools, but more widely as a society, can integrate women even more productively into the economy, and what role do business schools play, and so forth. I was very, very excited that we hit record numbers in our full-time MBA program in terms of gender balance this year, thanks greatly to the students who did so much work on that front. We have a long ways to go, as do other business schools in other parts of society. But any comments on that question of how we integrate women into the economy even more fully?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think, you look at business schools, medical schools, law schools, more and more women are entering. What you find, however, is that they're not advancing in the professions in the same way. So I'm a lawyer. I look at, partners in major firms. It's still 20% women. I look at women CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I think there are 2. It's a pretty dismal picture the further away or the further up the ladder one goes. I think part of it is the conflict between how we manage the workplace versus the roles that women play in raising children. And or taking care of an aging parent. I think women still bear the brunt of that, or have take more responsibility in that arena. But I actually think it's not how we integrate women, but how we adjust the workplace to take full advantage of women, and the fact that they are, take full advantage of their talents and what they bring. I think we're living in a 1950s workplace, and it's the year 2014.
Yeah, it feels like there's a transition that's in some ways only just begun. Lots of progress.
Well, and what's with the tech community?
Well,
I mean,
good question.
Seriously, there was an NPR story on this morning, and it was about how the numbers of women in the tech community have actually been going down. Yeah. Now, really? Yeah. I think the students here can help change that.
Yeah, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
Or an IPO without a single woman on the board.
Yeah. Women on board memberships. I mean, how hard is that? I mean,
if somebody's
not
thinking,
trying.
Yeah, somebody's.
I have no strong feelings.
Well, let's take some questions from the audience. I have a number of questions here, but if anybody has one, please use the microphone too, because we are capturing this on our video. Please, thank you.
So as you know, a lot of graduates of the UC system have graduated into a tough job economy in the past 6 years. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the challenges that institutions like the UC system face to making sure that we are properly preparing future generations to solve tomorrow's problems at all levels of the public education system. Or is thinking about developing marketable skills a fundamental flawed way to think about education itself?
Yeah. I think one goes to school to be educated, and I use to me, education is a very broad set of critical thinking, the ability to articulate complicated ideas, the ability to think through problems that don't permit of a black or white answer, but that have nuance and complexities associated with them. The ability to think not just of the now, but the next, and the next. And so in that connection, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we only focus on educating our students for their first job. Because in the economy we have, students are likely to have a dozen or more positions throughout their careers. And the world is going to be changing very rapidly around them. So they're going to need some of these thinking type capabilities, well grounded in science and literature and all the rest, in order to be able to navigate that throughout their career. So when I think about why you go to a university and why you pay to go to a university, I think that's what you should expect to leave with. And then we'll work with students to help them find that first job.
And do you think there's also some degree of, there are lots of, as you mentioned before, college degrees given from lots of different types of institutions. You represent the UC system, where I think your argument has particular purchase, right? But one might have a slightly gradated answer to that same question if you were slicing into sort of the college degree market in different places.
You might. I mean, the higher education in the United States is very much multimodal. Lots of different models now. You have big public research universities, you have state universities, you have two-year schools, you have technical schools, you have for-profit institutions, and all the rest. So one of the things that attracted me to this institution was the fact that it was the kind of institution it is within the higher ed environment.
Yeah, thank you. Please.
Lyons, I'm Billy Bladstein, second year. Jane, I didn't know you were a Truman Scholar, so congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment as well. Real quick before my question on tech, I worked at Uber for a while. Uber's first 3 PMs, product managers, were all females. So I think that is an accomplishment in a tech company.
Well, I do have an Uber app on my phone, so.
Yeah. The CEO
Just saying.
is not necessarily, he's in a different light, but okay. I think that's an accomplishment. My question's about leadership and formal authority. I'm in a Bob Wright class at Goldman School, and he talks a lot about how leaders that are in positions of formal authority, such as you've been in public stances where you are head of, say, the UC system, and how do you transition from that role of having the authority because of your position into being able to be a leader that can relate on a much more one-on-one level with individuals? And I guess my question is, how have you done that over your career, and kind of what skills have you recognized within yourself to be able to relate more one-on-one and outside of just your position?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think most people don't get leadership in the formal way without having practiced it in an informal way or begun in a sort of more informal way, almost as they started growing up. The things you volunteered to do in junior high or high school. I don't know, I was in the band. You need somebody to be head of the fruitcake sales one year. Hey, raise your hand, I'll do it. But all of a sudden you've got to manage, 100 people and, 50,000 fruitcakes. That's not as easy as it sounds, right? So not a position anybody gave you or that has a box around it on an org chart, but it is the act of the volunteering. And I think that when people are starting in the workplace in particular, it's that, and I've seen this both in the private sector and in the public sector, the people who were really advancing were the ones who volunteered early, say, well, I'll take that on. Well, I'll take that on. I'll manage that project. I'll make sure that, that campaign idea is carried forward. I'll make sure that speech is written out, et cetera, and do a really good job at it. And then the formal positions start to accrete. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, and that service orientation, I guess, for most of those people, right? I mean, they're wanting to grow themselves, of course, in the experience, but there really is, for most of those folks, a genuine service orientation. That
is true. The other thing is, we didn't talk about this, Rich, but I think some of leadership is also willingness to take risk. If you don't be the one who raises their hand, or you're not the one who runs for office, or you're not the one who does this or that, it's easy. You can go along fine. I'm sure you're all very smart people. Life will be very pleasant. But you won't have challenged yourself, and you won't risk failure.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to not only risk but go through failure is an important component of leadership.
It is.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think all deans worry about is that these programs have become so selective.
Right.
That it's you want to make sure you don't fall into a no stumbles policy, right? It's like, oh, you got a B minus. I've got 100 people that never saw anything below a B plus.
Yeah.
And sort of, if you are de facto selecting for people that have never taken personal and professional risks, and that's why their pedigree looks the way it does, boy, you're probably selecting away from the things that you want.
That you're actually looking for.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so that's something I think business schools are getting more, I know this one is, we're getting more and more conscious of. And people just sort of in the sort of conjectural world here, right? Some people are suggesting that, we are breeding this sort of risk tolerance or risk appetite out of this younger generation in parenting that is more and more helicopter-like and the choreographed young people's lives and things like that. Do you think there's anything in this idea that we may, in fact, be becoming less risk tolerant?
Well, I may have thought that till I moved to the Bay Area.
Okay.
And then I've met so many people here, some of whom are graduates of the Haas School, who absolutely have failed in not one, not two, but 3 startups. But number 4, now they found it.
Could you give me the names? I want to follow up.
Yeah. And I think part of what goes into saying, well, you're an innovation-based economy, that buzzword everybody likes to use is, well, okay, we understand that for all of the successes you hear about, underlying them are huge mountains of failures.
Agreed. Please, sir.
Thank you. You touched briefly on Berkeley's mission as a public education institution, and I wanted to go back to that. I think if you look back a number of decades in the U.S., one of the big trends is the growth of mega endowments on the private side, and at the same time, really a fall in the commitment of states and government in general towards public education in this country.
Yeah.
I think the result of that is if you look at the financial aid calculator at Berkeley at the undergrad level and you compare it to those in the large private universities, sometimes you find that it is in fact cheaper for a middle-class family to send a kid to Harvard or to Princeton or to Yale than it is UC Berkeley. My question is, does that challenge our ability to discharge our mission as a public institution? And if so, then how does the UC business model have to change in order for us to continue to be a place that provides a quality education at a price that people can afford?
Yeah, I think, first of all, in terms of the price of college education, we are still well below 1/3 of Harvard, Yale, or MIT. And there are relatively few private schools that students accepted to Berkeley would consider kind of comparators. So I look at those, like the Harvards, the Yales, MITs, the one down in Palo Alto. And look, I'm interested. And there is no doubt that some students can do better financially at those schools. There's no doubt that 55% overall of the students who attend the University of California will pay no tuition or fees while they are undergraduates. And the vast majority will graduate with no debt. So I don't know how the calculators are set up, but as a public university, because of the way we do return to aid and because of the Cal Grant program, that's kind of how the math slices out. The other aspect I would suggest is that there's an issue of scale. So you could take, I think, probably 7 times the entering class at Stanford, and you wouldn't yet have the entering class at Berkeley. Some fraction like that. So they're just so much larger. However, the point you make is a very important point, because here's the change that we're in the middle of. The change we're in the middle of is there was this implicit compact in the United States in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s where, the federal government gave the states land for their universities and basically paid for research, and the states paid for the operating costs of the universities, and if there was a little left over, a very little, then they would charge a little tuition. That compact has been broken. Research dollars have gone down in real terms. The states, no state now is paying into its universities the way they once were, and I can explain why that is as a state budget matter if you want. And so we have to look at another model. Will never be a way, as long as the state support is where it is. The core budget of a university is state funds and tuition, so you're going to have to, be looking at that. But we're also looking at expanding. Okay, what are other revenue sources we can look to? Can we look to growing our own endowment? Public universities haven't focused too much on philanthropy because, they really didn't have to. It was kind of a nice luxury of being at a public university. Luxury doesn't exist anymore. So we're going to have to look at growing a culture of philanthropy so that students come to the university and know that they're going to be asked not only to pay taxes but to give more back to their university. We're going to have to look at a better business or better ability to move and take advantage of some of the research and technology we do develop on our campuses. There's nothing about that is contrary to the academic or public service mission of the university, but the fact of the matter is there's probably some long-term revenue there that we're leaving on the table. We have to do everything we can to manage the fiscal assets of the university to maximum effect. So we've moved a lot of money around from short to long-term accounts, long-term to short-term accounts, et cetera, all to maximize the financial dollars that are available to the operation of the school. So your point is exactly right. The model is changing while we are in it. And so we are adapting as well.
Thanks for that question. I think one of the things that's changed here at Berkeley, and I suspect on your other campuses, how we think about our real estate assets. Mm-hmm. Right? Just a totally different approach over the last year.
Absolutely.
And you start realizing, holy smokes, there was a lot of value there that we weren't taking advantage of sufficiently, right? And so that's very exciting. Please, Nora.
Hi. Most of the students who graduate from the business school, and probably the law school as well here, will go out to work in private practice. Mm-hmm. We're talking about wanting them to go into politics or public service or mm-hmm. other sectors, and some of them will. Mm-hmm. But that will be a transition. Mm-hmm. And you made that transition from private sector to public sector. Were there different skills that you needed to master to make that transition? And what should our students be learning? What should we be teaching them to help them make those kinds of transitions?
Oh, yes, I was in private practice for 10 years, and I had a business litigation practice. And I liked private practice. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my clients. And but I knew in my head that at some point I wanted to do public service. I wasn't thinking electoral politics myself at that point, but more public service type work. One thing that helped me a lot was not getting used to living on the kind of money I was making as a lawyer in private practice. I didn't buy the big house. I didn't live fine, but I didn't live to the full extent, and I banked a lot of money and invested it. And so when I actually wanted to run for electoral office myself, when you don't work for a long period of time while you're campaigning, I had enough to support myself for 9 months, and also to put a check in to jumpstart the entire campaign. So there are decisions one makes as when you start out that can have long-term implications, and that's something to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah, kind of pay it forward.
Please, Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura Cray, and I'm a professor here in the business school, and I have a cold. And I, as a researcher who studies gender in business, I was delighted to hear that you have strong feelings about this issue of gender equality, and I was wondering if you could speak more specifically about how you, at the helm of the University of California, we can lead the way to affect change on this front.
Well, I think we're working it and doing it. I think everything from the students we have to the students who attend our graduate and professional schools to the faculty and how that workplace environment works. You just raised your eyebrows. Seems like you might have a point about that. And then making sure that we are really looking at the composition of university-wide task forces and committees and the like to see that they are balanced.
Okay. And just to follow up, I'm just curious whether you have any specific thoughts about how we can also shape the culture of the University of California and who's coming through here so that we can all collectively change the nature of organizations, as you've noted, are a little bit outdated and we're still living in the 1950s. So what can we do with our time and the resources that we have here on campus to give people the concrete tools that they need to lead change within the broader society?
Well, I think affecting change takes time and persistence. It's not an edict from on high. It's a vision that then has to be followed up on by numerous acts that go on underneath it, and it has to be, like I said, consistent and persistent. And you may not see the needle move right away. It may take a period of time. But one of the things, if I were teaching, and I had a seminar of students who were getting ready to go be business manager types, I would give them a kind of case study or two of a couple of companies and the composition of the board, their middle management, their upper management, their hiring committees, if they have one, and say, okay, what's right with this picture, what's wrong with this picture, and how would you fix it? And start serving the ball over the net a little bit to students themselves.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Maris, Director of the Entrepreneurship Center at UCSF, and I wondered if you could expand on your earlier comments about the importance of entrepreneurship and what the Office of the President could do to encourage it on the campuses.
Yeah, I think, look, we live in an entrepreneurial environment. We live in probably the greatest entrepreneurial environment in the United States, except for maybe Boston. And hey, and I'll tell you that, now, you all may disagree with me, but the way I look at the map of the United States and realize, as the governor of Arizona, I do have some pride in our neighbor to the east, but in terms of where the brain power of innovation is happening in the United States, it's a battle between California and Massachusetts. And to me, that's one of the greatest arguments for more public investment in the University of California, because that battle's going on right now. But in terms of entrepreneurship by the university per se, I think We can link more closely with leaders in the private sector who are involved in the so-called innovation or entrepreneurial economy, getting their ideas and soliciting their actual help. I think our own business practices as a university can be entrepreneurial. I'll give you an example. Until this summer, there was a rule in the university that we could not, as a university, take an equity position in any kind of a startup that came out of research done at the university. And we reversed that and said, well, we can share risk too, and taking equity in a startup is about sharing risk. And so that's entrepreneurial, as it were. We can facilitate the curriculum of entrepreneurship, and we can expose more students who are not necessarily business majors or graduate business students to the concept of entrepreneurship and what it means and what it entails and how someone who may be, say, a history major can be an entrepreneur. So just a few ideas.
Yeah, thanks for that question. A question came up at lunch just a couple of days ago. I was with somebody, and the question was, what is the font? What is the root source of value in society? And I think, we use words like entrepreneurship and innovation, and they're used a lot. What we came down to was this idea of it's really about human ingenuity, or creativity, or new ideas, or new combinations of old ideas, but call it human ingenuity, put into action, sort of brought to the world, connected to the world. That is the root source. And so whether we use the word innovation for that or not, it's hard to argue against that view, that's the kernel.
Right.
Of advancing society.
Oh, I really like that because it really does tie into public service mission of a public university. Bringing it to the world, creativity to the world. So, yeah, like that.
And so, one last question, and then we'll sum up here. People have talked a lot about digital, and everybody's experimenting, and UC is experimenting, and so forth. But as you look out, maybe it's hard to look out 5 or 10 years, but could we see a UC that is, at the undergraduate level or graduate level that is 20% digitally delivered, as we understand that term today, in 5 or 10 years?
I don't know if I'd put a number on it like that. I will say that I think online or digital education is here to stay. I think we're at the beginning of really learning how effective it is and the pedagogy, what works on the digital environment versus what doesn't. I mean, a few years ago, everybody thought MOOCs were the silver bullet, and we could educate, the whole next generation with laptops, and didn't prove to be the case. Had to be experimented with, and was, but proved to be not successful. Now we offer a variety of courses online, and most of them are what they call hybrid type courses, where part of it's in person, lectures and other things are online. I think that's actually a very attractive thing because why? I think it actually enlarges the education provided to the student and makes the actual classroom time more valuable instead of being taken up with the lecture material. So I see more and more of that sort of capability evolving. I think the production values associated with online have to really improve. I suspect many of the students here have actually taken an online class. I started taking an online class this summer, and I got bored very quickly. So, because I like that human interaction, I like knowing there are other people in the room with me who are suffering identically to what I am. I want to know if they don't. I want to look around the class and see similar expressions of confusion. I want to know that I am not the only one.
Was it a MOOC? Was it an asynchronous class?
Yeah, it was an asynchronous class. So yes, I think it will be part and parcel of the tools in the toolbox, but it will never substitute, I think, for the core of what a university education is about. At least the kind of university education we're talking about here at the University of California.
Yeah. You've said many things that we're going to take away. I've made a number of notes, just a couple of quick. I love one phrase, I'm going to tweet it with attribution. We are not here to be mediocre. That is a wonderful phrase, and it's an important thing. Clearly, the University of California has had that in its mind for a long time, and it's a very, very important one. The notion of education for marketable skills versus education for building intellectual and moral character. It is, of course, both, and that we are not training people just for their first job is a really important piece of getting to a more productive place on questions along those lines. And then, your commitment to leadership on so many fronts, on many sectors, it comes from something very clearly deep within you, and I think this group got to see that today, and we appreciate your being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you all.